I am going to allow Nancy to come and read her book, spotlighting her for everyone. And there we go. Thank you, Nancy.
Okay, thank you. You can hear me okay? Well, thanks everyone for being here. I'm excited to read. I haven't read for quite a while. As Tracy said before COVID, my book came out in 2016. And so let me just say one thing first about the way the book is structured. It's structured in what's called a mosaic. So just like tiles that you might have that are a mosaic, the writing is structured that way. So it is structured so that there are quite a few short pieces, but as you read it, they all fit together and start to make sense. So I've tried to pick a few pieces to fit into our time limit today. And so that's all. The first one's called I Already Am Who I Want to Be. Just gonna get my light a little better. When I was 5 years old, the milkman at my father's store asked me a very important question, which I didn't realize at the time was a very important question. It was a Saturday morning. The very bright summer sun had just come over our mountain. I was playing hopscotch on the sidewalk in front of our store next to our house. In 1956, hardly any traffic passed on the road in front of the store. In fact, most of the time it was so quiet I could hear the creek across the road, the slightest breeze, the crows, woodpeckers, and sparrows. I loved this kind of silence. The milkman drove to our small grocery store in New Creek, West Virginia, from Cumberland, Maryland. We were just 5 miles from the state border. He was the tallest of all the delivery men. On this morning, as usual, he stacked the milk cartons onto the dolly to wheel them inside. But just before he opened the front door of the store, he paused, looked down at me, and asked, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" I raised my hand to shade my eyes as I peered up at the tall man. Without an ounce of hesitation, I said, "I already am who I want to be." I don't remember what happened next. I could speculate, which I will do. The milkman may have told my father what I said. I may have gone into the store for a popsicle and overheard them laughing. But what I do know is that the milkman ignored my answer. There was just one question, one answer, and no follow-up, which of course is just the way it was. However, because there was no follow-up, I noticed something quite new beginning to occur. A little void took root, a little cave where my words inhaled, withdrew, and learned to love the darkness more than the light. When I said I already am who I want to be, I had spoken what I would call much later in my life, my soul words, words that come straight from my heart, where our deepest truth lives. I knew I was spirit. I knew I was a being of consciousness, but I needed someone else to know this with me. When there was no follow-up, given I was only 5, my human self quickly made a decision. Was I wrong for saying what I said? Is that why the milkman said nothing? Was that crazy? Was that a crazy comment? And so a thought passed across my brain, perhaps not fully conscious, but there nonetheless. As time passed, as more and more of my soul words garnered no response, the thought about being crazy repeated itself. It must be so, I thought. Why else would people act as if I hadn't spoken? My past began to take root with this false self-concept. I say false because I was not strange or crazy or wrong. Yet in that void of silence, my human self began to doubt. Healing. The root of the word heal is the same as the root of the word whole. When most people think of healing, they think that there is something to be fixed within them. There is nothing to fix, only a true perspective of self to find, only wholeness of self to feel. Believing untrue things about oneself causes all the emotional pain we typically seek to remedy. Healing is the process of becoming conscious of these unconscious beliefs and the painful feelings they cause. Thought precedes feeling. Most of the time, people are not conscious of the thoughts that cause their feelings, but slip into the feelings unconsciously. I liken thoughts to slippery fish. Unless we catch them, grab hold of one, examine it, and ultimately choose it or not, we are not living a conscious life. The ship metaphor. I practice thinking of my life as a ship on a river. I am the ship and the river. I am the physical, the ship, and the river, the non-physical. I am the particle, the ship, the wave, the river. Today, I felt as though my ship were disconnected from the river, run ashore on dry land, stuck. Rather than feel the pleasure of anticipating pages not yet written, I focused on the fact that they weren't yet written. Rather than imagine the joy of creation, I judged its absence. I was caught in the human habit of focusing on what one does not want, rather than imagining what one does want. In such a predicament, my choices are: 1, judge myself for feeling stuck and out of the water. 2, keep doing something to shift my energy and create a little relief. 3, eat. 4, become frightened at my state of non-productivity by comparing myself with others, more productive people such as Oprah. 5, worry about whether or not I'm supposed to write the book at all. 6, call my homeopath thinking if only I had a remedy. 7, do breath work. 8, call a friend. 9, rest. 10, trust the flow of my energy, even though it feels like it's not flowing at all. I picked number 10 and found myself in the TV room watching the video of my Uncle Arnott's home movies from the 50s and early 60s. Soon, I am transported into the world of my childhood. Snowstorms in the Allegheny Mountains, birthday parties, Christmas dinners, my cousin and me at the Enchanted Forest, my mother smiling just months before she died. I am 7. I watch as if I have amnesia and I'm trying to identify a person I should recognize, studying that child who was me. My hair is cut short and uneven like a mistake. Soon I feel me at age 7, my sense of being different, odd, not like my cousin or my sister. Do I judge myself for watching this? No, I do not, even though I had been reading The Power of Now a bit earlier in the day, which could have fueled such judgment, for here I was, being with the child I was just months prior to my mother's death. I chose this now. Later at the dog park, I speak aloud to myself while Horton eats grass along the fence. So what have I been thinking or focusing on today that made me feel like that lost, abandoned little girl that I was? Answer: I've been focusing on absence, the absence of in-person friends, the absence of more written pages, the absence of new art on my walls. I realized that I had been focusing, though quite unconsciously, on lack rather than presence. As Horton and I continue our walk, I begin to consciously choose thoughts that feel much better, like things always get better. And I always learn from my days. And I need to see how I am still creating the feelings that child I was. I need to, I needed to see how I am still creating the feelings of that child I was so that I don't do that anymore. That one feels real good. So I shift my mind, thus my feelings, thus my entire vibration. I'm flowing again, ship and river, body and spirit, rising to a feeling of peace. History. I own my history as historical. When I see my life as a ship, my history is the trail I leave behind. From a certain human and psychological perspective, the trail has a huge impact upon my subconscious beliefs, which hold the vibration of all the programming that is not fully conscious. I write about that history here, not as truth, not as who I am, but as a piece of the puzzle along the way of realizing the reality of me. I am an individualized expression of God. I don't mind using the word God. I mean divine love when I use the word. I mean Mother, Father, God. I mean I am a point of consciousness in infinite mind. Do I have another 2 minutes? Yeah, okay. The summer of 71. I'm the elder here in the group, by the way. The summer of 71. This was the summer the New York Times began to publish the Pentagon Papers. This was the summer Nixon signed the bill to lower the voting age to 18. This was the summer Jim Morrison, the lead singer of The Doors, was found dead in a bathtub in Paris. This was the summer Gloria Steinem delivered her address to the women of America. In the midst of what was then called the Cultural Revolution, this was also the summer I wrote in a journal for the very first time. I had traveled with Janice, my best friend from high school, to work for the summer in Hyannis, Massachusetts. Janice and I first met because she had read the write-up about me in the local paper when I won the 6th grade essay contest. She looked forward to my arrival at the high school from my country school. She said she knew we would be friends because I was smart too, like her. I was excited to live by the sea that summer, to be far enough away from West Virginia that I could feel the larger world, beyond the pull of my father and my father's land, the millions of trees, the ceaseless Appalachian hills, their special power that taught me how to love the earth, and in so many ways made me happy to be alive. I longed for a new experience of myself. Janice brought Herman Hesse books with her that summer, which she shared with me. She also brought a journal. I watched her write each morning as the sunlight streamed through our window. I wanted to be like her, to have her confidence, though what I really wanted was to be me, to be my own confident self. Janice's mom taught high school English. The student she talked about most is now famous, Henry Louis Gates. She called him Skip. She always said he would be famous. He made her classes come alive, she said. Janice's mom was also the first adult woman I felt seen by. It was such a new experience that at times I would sit across from her in her living room, feeling simply ecstatic, thinking, this is how human connection feels. She looked at me as we spoke. She paused between exchanges. I had never experienced communication like this in my family. Janice passed some of the mothering she received on to me through the kindness and understanding of a best friend. You should keep a journal too, she said one morning as we drank our Lipton tea. So I bought a yellow spiral notebook with lined paper. Alone in our room one morning, I made a decision to write. I felt an odd sensation, as if I had reached for a journal just like this a million times before, but I hadn't. I lifted the notebook from my nightstand. I watched as if I were in a movie, only this movie was directed by me, by my heart. And though I had no words to describe or understand this moment as it unfolded, I remember it now, some 30 years later, because it was the moment the life I'm living now began. It was the moment I began to give voice to my spirit. I chose the pen rather than pencil. I wrote without thinking. I wrote words about being itself. Quote, alive, finding out one reality, grasping it, releasing it. Alive each moment, aware of more. Looking inward, never comparing. Alive, standing alone. Within, waiting for myself. Burst, human being. With each word I wrote, my body shifted from feeling like rock to feeling like water. The words belonged to me. They weren't my father's words or words to please my father. My sister would not see these words to call them fake. I had connected to language, expressed myself through language, recognized an ancient respect for language, and allowed my heart to open to language. These words seem so simple to me now, so contained and timid, so constricted, so abstract. But they were the beginning seeds of my private expression, which would be my primary lifeline to wholeness. Back to the being I knew so well that morning, playing hopscotch on the sidewalk in front of Dad's store when the milkman asked his question. Thank you all.
Mm. Thank you, Nancy. Mm. Mm. Thank you. Yeah, so the invitation is just to stay in whatever you're noticing in your own body right now after hearing Nancy read. I'm aware that I've read the pages, but I've never heard Nancy speak her words in this way. And it's really, really this powerful revisitation. Yeah. So next up, I'm going to introduce Christine Varnavas. And I've known Christine since, I believe, around 2018, maybe late 2017. Christine and I were colleagues that provided peer support services for folks working through mental health and or recovery issues. And then just got to know her in that capacity. And shortly after that, well, maybe a couple of years after that, I got to know her in her capacity as a TRE provider. TRE stands for trauma or tension release exercises. And it's a beautiful practice that has been extremely beneficial for me over the years, so much so that I am now studying with Christine to become a provider of TRE. And that's another story, but that's really my connection with her. And Christine's book, Christine is the only person I've done a joint reading in person with. And we did this last autumn, last November in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. Christine's book, Heal Your Shit and Find Your Happy. And it tells of her journey and how she, found some happy, healed some shit. And It's powerful, it's resonant, and let's see, without further ado, Christine lives in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, and I am going to go ahead and stop talking. Christine, it's all yours.
Thanks, Tracy. I'm going to start with a little bit off the back cover, just so you get a general idea of what this is. Just so you're not caught off guard. So Heal Your Shit, Find Your Happy is a call to action for women who manage anxiety, who gracefully or not handle the overwhelm and stress of life, maybe depression, who have felt like they were spinning out of control, who've ever been called too much, or who've ever thought, what is wrong with me? It's for adult survivors of childhood sexual assault and the people who love them. So, and I love that you mentioned TRE, Tracy, because that's the section I'm going to read about in my discovering this tool. So the book is a memoir. It's a look back at my life and some of the interesting stories that I've gone through. I have a cat making a lot of noise in the back. So he just stopped in to say hi. Stories that I've lived through, for me, with me, about me, above me. And then the magical tools that showed up to help me navigate those stories. So, okay. Making sense of me. Feeling, healing, and trauma education. It started with a phone call from my mother. She said she just done this thing with her friend in Arizona while she was on vacation, and I needed to do it for myself and my clients. It had something to do with the body. She finished by saying, there's a training coming up in Madison. I'm paying for it and you're going. Excuse me, what? I had no idea what she was talking about. This thing was called TRE, which stands for Tension, Stress, and Trauma Releasing Exercises. This was in 2014, and by then I'd been teaching group fitness, spinning, and yoga classes for almost 25 years. I assumed since the title had exercise in it, that my mother thought it would be a good fit for me. To clarify, TRE is not an exercise program. In 2014, I was heading into my second divorce, broke, single, parenting two amazing, beautiful, talented daughters, and trying to figure out how I got there, and I was stressed all the time. I was teaching community-based yoga for employee wellness programs and teaching private lessons for a living and trying to figure out how to make more, for a living and trying to find more sustainable employment. I looked online to see if I could figure out, get a visual of what my mom was talking about. I'd never heard of TRE. When I looked it up, I found one video of a woman teaching it to another woman and what looked like a fairly new website with little information and not much more. But I was curious. I did sign up. I did go to the training a few months later. I had no idea what I was in for or the impact this thing would have on my life. It wasn't long before I was in Madison at the venue for TRE training, standing in line with many others, getting my folder, getting my name tag, and signing a lot of papers. Next, I remember sitting with roughly 40 or more others in a conference room, watching the organizer and a few others chat, and then being introduced to the founder of TRE, Dr. David Berceli. Dr. Berceli gave his presentation. His slides explained how he developed TRE and the science behind it. And I remember thinking to myself after a few slides, what is he talking about? And I am so out of my league here. The slides for that section of the presentation were fairly science heavy, and I didn't understand anything he was saying as I had no reference at the time about neurology, how the brain works, how trauma affects the brain, and more. It reminded me of stats class in grad school, not my favorite. I felt so dumb because it was hard for me to understand the science that he was discussing because my anxiety was at an all-time high. And it also fed into my, I'm too dumb to understand this, inner critic. Right on cue, as I'd done often in my life, I had an exit plan, and I heard my lovely inner critic say, okay, stay until the break, and then you can leave and no one will notice. Shortly after, as luck would have it, the theme of the slides changed to anatomy. Ooh, this I understood. Phew. Dr. Berselli had great pictures, and my anxious, self-doubting, hyper self-critical brain calmed the F down. So I stayed longer. Oh, my glad am I did. My life changed in so many ways after that weekend. Then we practiced TRE. It was weird. It was magic. It was profound. The short version of the story is I was laying on the floor with 40 other people there, and we were shaking or vibrating or whatever you want to call it. Some people were laughing. Some were crying. Some were quietly talking, the ones who had done it before, and more. And I remember looking around to see what the other people were doing because I heard noises that I couldn't determine. We were instructed that it was okay to look around, but that it was best to remember to breathe and try to focus on ourselves. I did, and this thing felt like a massage from the inside out. I had never felt anything like this in my life. It also felt normal and natural, but I couldn't explain why. Dr. Berselli and the other trainers were walking around and observing, checking in, and quietly talking to some of us on the floor. I remember being sad, and I wasn't sure why. I also remember feeling like I could not take a deep breath. I was breathing, but it felt shallow and stuck in my chest. That was weird for me as a yoga and exercise person. I didn't remember ever having that feeling before, except when I took a breathing class. As my breathing became more challenged, Dr. Berselli walked by. He must have sensed something was a little off with me. I'm certain I had a weird look on my face. I don't have a poker face. He knelt down and asked how I was feeling. His voice was calming, and I remember telling him that I felt like I couldn't take a deep breath and how that was weird for me. He asked if he could try to help, and I said, please, yes. I loved hands-on modifications from teachers at other fitness and yoga conferences. It was a game changer for anything. Plus, it always felt good to have someone do physical adjustments to your body that helped it move and feel better. He then, as I now know, did an intervention. He applied gentle pressure to the restricted area in my chest and put a little pressure on the diaphragm. How he knew what to do and in what specific place blew my mind. He told me to inhale. I did. Then he applied more gentle pressure to an area on my sternum, and I was told to exhale. I did. And then I took the deepest breath I had ever taken in my entire life. Or at least that's what it felt like at the time. This blew my mind. I was shocked. I was relieved. And then I started to cry. I let the crying happen, which for me, prior to that, crying in public was not okay. It was as if my entire body let go. He gently suggested I roll to the side and rest, and I did. I cried more quietly, and for whatever reason, I knew that my life had changed because something shifted in my body. I felt unstuck. I was in the right place. I wasn't sure why, but I knew I was. That began my training to be able to teach others this amazing body-based healing tool. So what really is TRE? The short version is that TRE is a universal body-based healing and wellness tool that is a series of 7 simple exercises that anybody can do anywhere at any time. It activates our primitive reflexes that bring us out of fight or flight and freeze. It can help release stress and trauma, increase resilience, decrease reactivity, decrease anxiety. It helps regulate our nervous system, and more and more and more, and on and on and on. Doing the template, or the 7 exercises, as we call it, is fun and easy, and it feels good. So when I'm asked, what do you do in a TRE session? I hear myself saying, we do a series of movements that stretch and stress certain parts of the body, and then we lay on the floor and shake or tremor. Insert smile here, wink. I wait to see the look on the other person's face after they hear this. This is usually when most people give me a wait, what look? And then I explain further that the shaking or the vibrating or the shimmying or tremoring or whatever you want to call it is natural for the body to do and is the completion of the stress cycle. If you've ever seen a dog shake from fear, it's the same thing. Think about dogs when they're scared and from loud noises like the 4th of July or a thunderstorm. My dog's behavior changes drastically when they're scared. They shake, but they don't think it's weird, so they don't stop it. They allow it to happen. Most people relate to this when they go, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense. or I've seen my dog do that. I then go into my litany of how amazing it feels when what it's done for me on a physical and an emotional level, and their eyes get really big and the response is always, ooh, I need to try that. Or I know so-and-so who really needs to try that as well. And then they laugh. And then I tell stories about it. In a nutshell, that's what TRE is. But there's more. What this brilliant method of stress and trauma management is a tool for so much more. It's helped me connect with myself on a deliciously deep level. It's given me the best trauma-informed education I could ever ask for, has helped me heal, and has helped me make sense of my life. By that, I mean my thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that in more times than I want to admit, didn't make sense. They were rational. They weren't rational, they were reactional. So why was this so transformational for me and thousands of others worldwide? Because of the sexual assault and my nervous system not feeling that I was safe, because I've lived with unprocessed trauma and emotions stuck in my body for most of my life. Our bodies store emotions in all of our parts. Our muscles, our fascia, our bones, our organs, our cells, our everything. I also have PTSD. I don't have a formal diagnosis, so why and how dare do I say that I have that without the formal testing, formal diagnosis, and documentation? Because I know I do, and also because of the countless amazing and highly talented mental health professionals that I work with and have discussed it with at length, and they all confirm it. If you look at the markers or the characteristics on the various sites that are devoted to PTSD, I meet a lot of them or have at one time in my life. Mind you, and my symptoms have diminished greatly over the years based on how much work I do on myself. The other reason for the no formal diagnosis is when I told my mother what happened when I was 16, she filed a lawsuit on my behalf. I started therapy and more, and we, meaning the world, didn't know enough then about post-traumatic stress. It's only recently that sexual assault survivors are given this diagnosis in the hope to offer support that they need. Prior to that, it was for military personnel only. And by that, I mean in the mid-1980s. Once I became familiar with the markers, it helped make sense of many things in my life. I'm not attached to the phrase or the letters or anything. It just helped me make sense of things. Had we known now what we know, had we known then what we know now in 2023 about trauma and the psychological and neurological effects it has on us, things may have been different for me. But if they were different, I may not have landed where I am today. I wouldn't have the stories I have. I wouldn't have had my amazing, beautiful, colorful, sometimes drama-filled life. I wouldn't be able to do the work that I do. It may have been easier at times. Who knows? This amazing tool helped me navigate and heal deeply like nothing else ever has. It got to the underlying deep issue that talk therapy, exercise, yoga, and everything else I've done in my life to heal this couldn't quite do. It was still and is the tool that addressed the deep inner part of me that no one sees and that I couldn't access. It activated the proverbial inner healer in me. This tool that helps us do the emotional deep dive without talking or reliving the story is one of the best kept secrets in the healing world, similar to the ACEs study, the largest public health study no one's ever heard of. Similar to that, the inner healer in us is a vibration, and it helps us get unstuck. The vibration is movement itself. Movement heals. Women who are childhood sexual assault survivors and the women who love them and support them need this tool in their toolbox. Well, really everyone does. This tool or method heals us from the inside out. The vibration or tremor mechanism that is activated through these exercises release tension in the physical and emotional structure of the body. When the body doesn't feel safe, it contracts, it tenses. When the body does feel safe, it relaxes. The vibration or the tremor that is activated by practicing TRE is the internal healing mechanism that we all have hardwired in us. The vibration or external shaking that is visible can foster a sense of calm on the inside. We are well and whole when our inner state matches our outer form. Calm on the inside allows us to be present, to feel lighter in our bodies, and show up in the world. Yeah. Done.
So yeah, just take a moment, take a breath, take Christine's reading in. Mm. Mm. Yeah, super touching. Thank you, Christine. Really lovely. And as somebody who's training to be a provider, somebody's doing a lot of TRE as part of my training. I just feel this welling up. I get it like in my body so much. It's pretty amazing. Yeah. Right. Well, I am now going to introduce Heather Hendrie. Heather, I met through a mutual friend, a woman who I've been in a writing group with for many, many years, a lovely woman named April. And yeah, we've had some great conversations, and Heather has 2 books that she has been the curator of. They're 2 anthologies, part of the series Awfully Hilarious. The first one, Stories We Never Tell. The second one, Period Pieces. And Heather lives in British Columbia, so she's our international reader for the evening. And yeah, what I so appreciate about Heather's work and what she's imagined is the gathering, the curating, the bringing together of women's stories or women identifying folks around topics that folks sometimes don't want to talk about or tend to look away from. And I just so value that the conversations can open up around subjects that are often not spoken of. So Heather, feel free to share anything else as well. And I look forward to hearing you read. I'm curious to see what you read.
Well, thank you very much for that beautiful introduction, Tracy. And I'm so glad to be here. And I'm so grateful for all the attendees here present tonight in this space. I love, it was Tracy coined the term to behold and be held, to both witness and support one another, and to be held in a communal space. And that's what these anthology projects were about. The beautiful thing for me writing in anthology is there are many voices on these pages, and I have had the great pleasure of being held by other writers and holding other writers as we share. It's such a treat to hear both Nancy and Christine, your stories. Big shoes to fill. I'm going to read from the first Awfully Hilarious book this evening, which happened by accident after I went on a terrible date and reached out to a friend who said, "Oh, I just had a terrible date. We could write a book." You know, you always just say that sort of casually. And then I said, wait, we should write a book. And then we did. And it has this award-winning sticker on it. And I'm saying that because it was such an empowering process to do this playful thing that then we self-published and our words are out in the world. So all of us here have stories to tell, and it was easier than I thought it would be. I also am going to say very deliberately, I'm going to read a piece that is to provide some comic relief. And to follow up on what you've shared, Christine, I'm a therapist, of course, in my day job. I'm a clinical counselor and work as a wilderness therapist. I get to work outside a lot. And one of the things that our nervous systems do really well to take care of ourselves and manage really difficult things. Of course, we shake, although we've unfortunately been socially conditioned out of doing that. So it's wonderful that tools like TRE exist to bring us back into what we have, you know, what animals, wildlife historically do, and we historically could do. but also laughter and tears also can really help our nervous systems release. And so the Awfully Hilarious Anthology series deliberately bring in they're playfully provocative. I'll leave it at that. They're playfully provocative. And I am going to read a story called The Garlic Clove. Spoiler alert, the alternate title is A Case for Canestin. So in the theme of behold and beheld and women's stories, this speaks to personal experience with women's health. I should say the health of female identifying people or folks whose bodies were assigned female at birth. I felt a pinch in my ovary on the day my nephew Charlie was born to my younger sister Martha, making me an aunt for the first time. I have now twice over become a sister-in-law to my younger sister's husbands and have the great joy of my 5 nieces, but Charlie was my first nephew. I wasn't present when he arrived. I wish I'd been there to hold my sister's hand and to look into his eyes the moment they first opened onto the world. But no, I was away on Vancouver Island, and I think Martha was in labor at the exact moment that I keeled over in the ditch. Picture this now for a moment, a blissful scene as I run along a tree-lined dirt road, dappled with summer sunspots, just like me. Beautiful thimbleberries and salmonberries in their spectrum of oranges and reds are ripening along the roadside, and everything smells like summer. A gentle breeze plays with my curls as I jog, and then I fall over. What seems like a while later, I find myself prostrate with the forget-me-nots in the trash and gravel of the ditch. A sticky O. Henry wrapper sticks to my calf as I curl up in pain, feeling an intense burning rising from somewhere near my left ovary. Rivulets of sweat stream salt into my eyes, and I struggle to stay conscious. And that's when it comes to me. Damn it! There's a clove of garlic up there! If you could imagine for a moment touching freshly minced garlic to your eyeball, multiply the sensation by 100, insert the smell of trash and fresh dog poo, and you'll be about ready to join me in the ditch. I could start to spin out on the patriarchy and why the supposed secrecy of anything to do with my vagina, periods, hormones, or sexuality are really why I've landed in the ditch. But I'll leave all that for a little later, and now we'll stick to the specifics of this particular situation. I had tried to extract the offending clove 2 days ago in an intense bathroom stall yoga session. Panting and frustrated, I'd given up in vain, hoping it would eventually just work itself out. But like so many other pain points in life, clearly it hadn't. I was at a summer camp for adults, training with a woman named Joanna Macy in my most recent passion, eco-psychology. Tucked away on Vancouver Island, we slept in cabins on a gorgeous inlet of the Pacific Ocean. Eagles flew overhead and otters played in the waves. It was idyllic, except for this one thing. I had really hoped the situation would either just resolve itself or wait until my eventual return to civilization. But as you can see, it hadn't. And how, you may be wondering, did I get myself into this pickle? It was the result of necessity, which necessity, they say, the mother of invention and the occasionally disastrous idea. It started a week ago. 3 days into the camp, I noticed that it was getting itchy down there. I mean, really itchy, as in mosquito bite in my crotch, resulting in a burning need to surreptitiously scratch it on coffee breaks and shuffle just a little too much in my seat, kind of an itchy. Of course, I recognized the feeling. I'd known it before, after each new lover, a course of antibiotics, or, Halloween and all those delicious mini chocolate bars. I could usually solve it all very easily with a quick trip to the drugstore, except in Latin America, but that is another story. Who knew that my loose translation of vaginal mushroom would not get me what I needed in a Peruvian pharmacy? So, stuck here 30 minutes by car from the nearest drugstore, I asked my campmates if anyone had brought any antifungal cream with them. Not surprisingly, think hippie summer camp for adults. Nobody had brought anything remotely resembling a pharmaceutical drug, goddess forbid. And that's when Tree, a short-haired pixie in flowing pants, suggested, why not try yogurt? Or a garlic clove. That always works for me, chimed Lila from the top bunk. They didn't describe the treatments in any further detail. I didn't ask for more either, because these kinds of topics have always felt so awkward to me. I ignored the girl's advice for a little while, but 2 days later, now desperate, I snuck a little bowl of yogurt away from the breakfast buffet. It was awkward to veil it with my tank top, to say the least. I snuck away into the bathroom, and it was even more uncomfortable to waddle back out again after spooning the gloopy white live culture over my nether regions. The slimy intervention came with numerous side effects, the least of which was the white goop that coolly rode down my left thigh, stopped short at my sock, and then slid off onto the floor during a moment when I hoped no one was watching. And so there I was, 2 days later, surreptitiously asking the kitchen staff for some garlic. They gave me 2 cloves, and these were at least easier to tuck into my pocket as I made my way to the bathroom. Gritting my teeth, I inserted the savory suppository and exhaled deeply. This better freaking work, I muttered under my breath. But as you can so clearly see, it didn't. So now I'm lying in the ditch where we first started this story, sweating and pinpointing the exact source of my problem to that clove-shaped bit of fire next to my uterus. I take a deep breath in, prop myself on my elbows, and slowly limp home. An hour later, I'm drenched in sweat and back in our dorm room. I pause to stick my head under the sink, grateful for the cold water running down the back of my neck, then make a beeline for the one woman there with a car. Tree, I ask weakly, could you please take me to the hospital? En route, she went into a very uncompassionate lecture about how I should have put the garlic clove into a stocking prior to insertion to facilitate extraction. For one thing, that would have been good to know 4 days ago. But on the other hand, I've never had the necessary tools because stockings are but one aspect of society's grooming of me to be a good woman. I'd had the good sense to find so constraining that I ditched it completely by the age of 4. I wish I'd had the good sense to do the same with much of the rest of it, as I lay thrashing about on the kitchen floor at 4 years old in my leotards, deliberately ripping an enormous hole through the crotch of the offending garment, thereby achieving the excellent multi-pronged win of never having to wear them again, nor having to attend Sunday school that morning. The joy that came from that early win is likely what led me to become a revolutionary. Only now, at the age of 43, and diagnosed with a chronic health condition that much of the establishment barely considers valid, yet valid enough that I've been declined disability coverage by the insurance companies for my atypical response to the hormone progesterone, have I begun to realize the extent to which people must go to receive care. Women's health has been made secret and shameful for so long, we tend not to question it. But as I grow older and wiser, I'm done with the backroom cures. It's time to bring it all to the fore. Back then, though, I was still shy about it as I shamefacedly approached the triage desk in Victoria's emergency room. I'm really sorry, I'm kind of embarrassed, and I hate to be a drain on the system, but, well, I have a yeast infection, and I tried to take care of it myself, and I didn't get to the part about what I'd done to treat myself before the nurse in this progressive city full of hippies interrupted me, shook her head, and rolled her eyes. My God, honey, this is Victoria, British Columbia. You think we don't see this every day? I recommend you girls give Western medicine a try sometime. Take a seat, we'll get to that garlic clove as soon as there's an opening. And do you know, the nurse who treated me had the audacity, or perhaps it was generosity, to offer me back the offending clove following the extraction. Thank you for listening. And I heard a beautiful podcast this week where they spoke to the concept that very often comedy equals tragedy plus time. And that's very much what these projects are about. So thank you for being here to share. And we'll just take a moment to catch our breath before I have the great pleasure of introducing the woman who's brought us all here together this evening on Saturday, April 20th, Tracy Chipman. And I could not be more delighted than to hold her book in my hands. This book means so much to me, and very often on those days when I wake and don't quite know what to do, or it's raining, or it's raining on the inside, I light a candle and I pick up this book, and there's something very potent about Tracy's words and the way that I find this very rare, but there's a really special way that some poets and writers have of connecting us straight to our sense of unity and soul in the ways that we need in certain moments. And Tracy's words have done this for me, and I'm eternally grateful, Tracy. And this book, I know that at least one person in the call is here who I've shared this with, but I have mailed to specifically a couple friends who live on the shores of the Great Lakes because your words have been so resonant that I felt that they would speak to others too. So I'd like to introduce Tracy, who lives in a boreal forest in northern Wisconsin on Anishinaabe lands near the magnificence that is Lake Superior. Her work as an oral storyteller and somatics yoga instructor infuse her writing and all her relationships. This was her first book, and I certainly hope not her last.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you very much for that lovely introduction, Heather. Yeah, all right. So a little bit about Borealis Mundi, the structure of it. It's Borealis Mundi resting in place, loss, and grace. And the word Borealis Mundi, the two words mean northern worlds. And the book is broken into 4 sections, which correspond to 4 places. One is a place where my mother grew up, where my grandparents lived for most of their life, and where I had a deep, deep kinship to land. A little tiny unincorporated place in the middle of north central Wisconsin called Gad. The other place is this big, amazing Lake Gitchigumi, Lake Superior, the Big Mama, who's just down a few blocks that way behind me. And the third is a small lake, which was once a river that was dammed up during the logging boom. And that is a place, the lake is Lake Menominee, near the town of Menominee in central Wisconsin. And then the 4th place is a whole country. It's the country of Scotland, where I spent a good chunk of the 90s living and engaging with the tradition bearers that reside there in the Outer Hebrides. So I'm going to read a few different pieces and parcels, and minding the time, I'm going to begin with the story. And there's a little mix of everything. There's poetry, there's prose, there's essay, there's personal narrative. Yeah. So this is called Golden, and it's from the Gad section. In August, in the threshold of Lunasaw, the apples cling, thick and sweet to the gnarled tree, while yellow finches spill like golden coins from the branches. At every age and chapter, I have known this tree, felt favored by her petals. I've climbed and twined into her branches and sat well fed in her shade, breathing in her ripe perfume. Between the well-known, well-worn house that my grandparents live in and the apple trees stand 2 white pine giants. Their needles cascade like plush curtains framing the house. These 2 are dear old friends. Their tenant sparrows wake us at dawn, their wind-laced lullabies ferry us to sleep. Inside the White House, my grandparents dwell, their home of 69 years. I am here even when I am not. Inside the house, my grandmother rests for the first time in her almost 93 years. She rests. She is dying. Leona Ann Dassel Albrecht is shedding her body. Her tremendous north-dwelling heart, that faithful old pump that has seen her through nearly 73 years of marriage, 5 births, and scores of deaths, and thousands of jars of pickles. Her purposeful hands that kneaded infinite loaves are paper thin, warm, and unspeakably soft on my cheek. She is of this place in north central Wisconsin, Gad, in the township of Bern, halfway down a dead-end red granite gravel road on the cusp of Taylor and Marathon counties. Leona, the 9th of 13 children who survived infancy, all of whom she outlived, spoke only German until she went to school at the age of 5. Her last year of school was 8th grade. During a game of cribbage, her favorite card game, if something didn't go her way, she used a phrase, holy schmutzenfink, her personal swear word. Now, 72 years into her story, she lies at this next threshold. Visitors come from 5 counties to stop in for closure and peace. Some eyes remain dry. Some eyes meet her blue eyes with even steady love. Those eyes that cannot meet hers speak in the hushed language of the heart. For the visitors, I bake sugar cookies using her mother, Magdalena's recipe. I offer her a piece and she takes it into her mouth, chews and swallows carefully. Then licking honeyed crumbs from her dry lips, she says, they're good. This will be the final feast, the last solid food she'll take into her singing mouth. My grandpa, in his recliner, watches without speech. Daily he sits beside her for a spell, eyes rimmed crimson, burning to spill the tears. At night, I lie listening to her breath, tuning in for that final cycle. The nights are all restlessness and old shadows. I soothe her by climbing into her bed, the hospice bed in the living room. And hip to hip, we sing, "You are my sunshine." I breathe her in. We pray, "Our Father who art in heaven." And I wet her dry lips with a sponge. We are deep in threshold time now. All 6 senses are lit, luminous. One golden afternoon as she sleeps, I sit beside her watching the too bold August sun press through the window. She stirs, her eyes open, fluttering like moths. She sits up from where she's resting and raises her arms high, eyes to the ceiling. She calls out, "Ma! Mother!" Time slows to a near halt. Then she turns and looks directly at me, into me, her eyes lit with some inner fire. A dawning recognition lights her face, and in awe, she slowly says to me, "It's just a play. It's just a show. It's just a play. It's just a show." I am searching her eyes, and they are filled with a truth I have never seen there. Time stops. The house is so still, as if it's taking this in too. Then the liminal spell is broken by a door slamming somewhere. For the next week, all spoken language would ebb from her as she moved closer and closer to that place where we all will meet. She still smells like my grandma, of clover and milk, flour and sunshine, fried potatoes and aquanet. And then at noon on the 6th of August, her soft presence became too big for her body, and out she slipped into everything. We were fortunate to have her to ourselves for a few hours, as unorthodox as it was. I'd insisted. I bathed her creased, soft as satin body, pale as the moon, each line a story. Grandpa watched this holy act, eyes seeping. The low rumble of his voice slipped into that space to thank me. And thanks wasn't a common word to fall from those stubborn and stoic lips. I dressed her in something colorful and comfortable and gathered plants and flowers from her garden. And when she was ready, we gathered her husband, her children, and some of her grandchildren. And then we raised our voices true and clear, singing Amazing Grace, until even the flies on the ceiling were on their knees. Outside, the August sun baked the red granite road. The white pines whispered their wind-song lullabies, and the perfume of untasted apples spilled through the window. This next story is partial from the section about Lake Superior. Check the time. A vast boreal forest lined the way, bold and branched, naked and snow-clad in the white, lush winds of winter. In the season's repose, tree after tree after tree bristled the land. Spruce, white pine, oak, birch, balsam, maple, ash. The north spoke. It had been speaking to me since I was an infant. Going up north meant going to my grandparents in Gad. Going up north meant the circle of my grandmother's arms, her love, her cooking, fresh bread, Griebel soup, fresh cheddar from their cheese factory, and apple kuchen topped with fresh cream. Up north meant wild spaces and the seemingly endless sea of forest and swamp, which flowed around islands of pasture land, all stitched together by red granite gravel roads. North meant both wilderness and safety. So on this January day, I drove north with my father's iron-headed axe, perpetually red-rimmed eyes, and a black bag filled with more grief than I knew what to do with. First Venus, then my dad, then Mike. I was headed north and off the map with questions so thick in my mind, they seemed to hunt the wind, seeking answers. And strangely, there was grace, or what I call grace. This was larger, deeper, this flowing, interdependent connection that I was just a small part of. This grace and awareness of source, God, goddess, the unified field slipping in slantwise under the blanket of the star-salted night, or along the liminal space where sandstone met a great inland sea. There, with a lung full of indigo at the edge of my world, the questions all fell away. Eager and anxious, exhausted and naive, I was leaving a string of endings and arriving to a beginning which started with another Great Lake, this inland sea, Superior. It was the 4th of January. Mike had been gone 2 months and 4 days. It was minus 14 degrees outside without the wind chill. And as I pulled up to the cabin, this new north dwelling home, I whispered a greeting to the tangle of snow-flocked trees. All around, blue-hued lake effect snow shrouded everything. There, set in that pure white, sat the cabin, 400 square feet, 30 years old, hand-built and uninsulated. It had a wood stove. There was no running water. There was no going back. I was home. So I think I'm going to read just a poem in closing. This is from the Lake Menominee section near Menominee, Wisconsin. It's called A Crone is Born. I am a queen, leaning into crone. Raven sits on my left shoulder. 12 moons and no release, no shedding, a bloodless womb. Another significant death to digest. I am biologically infertile. 2 unborn fetuses released, mostly by choice, stand behind me. More precious now for the spark they were, for who they could have been, could have become, and for the privilege of choice. Culturally, I'm told I'm becoming invisible, barred from the life-giving initiation great-grandmother Magdalena lived through 15 times, grieving for this unspoken, under-acknowledged rite of passage, making peace with the lost pieces of motherhood. What will now birth from the crucible, the womb of my life, visible and more whole than all the decades before? So thank you for taking in our readings, our stories, our voices, for beholding, and our wishes hopefully being held in some shared experience. So just this notion of resting in what has been brought or shared with you over in the last hour and some. And of course, you'll be the carrier of these stories now. Even if you never think of them again, you'll be carrying them with you as we carry our stories along. And yeah, I just want to pause and open the floor up for any questions or any comments that you feel drawn to ask or share. And then we'll do some thank yous and we'll bow to all of us for being here before we close. So feel free to unmute yourself, and you can drop a question in the chat if you feel drawn to doing that, and whatever feels right. And raise your hand this way, or you can raise it in the Zoom somewhere. There's so many different buttons these days. I feel like an old fart not knowing my way around that, but you can raise your hand in the Zoom thing too. Anyone? And I'm a big fan of awkward silences because I think awkwardness is what moves us forward, or I think someone cool said that once. Maybe there aren't any questions. Yeah. So if questions do arise, you will have our information shortly. I'll be sending out an email with some follow-up. Thank you, Tina. And Nancy just dropped something in the chat. The email that I send will give you a little, information about our books, where to find them, all that good stuff. And feel free to reach out if you feel drawn. And just thank you. Thank you, Heather. Thank you, Nancy and Christine. Thank each of you for showing up, for being part of this and listening with your whole bodies. I could feel it, this Zoom thing. There's a connection that can happen, even though we're spread out thousands of miles apart. Yeah. So thank you. Thanks to the powers that be that brought us here together and all of that. We're alive. We're breathing. Life is a bizarre, amazing, weird, beautiful trip. Whereas my grandmother had this insight on death's door. It's just a play. It's just a show. So Christine or Heather, Nancy, do you have anything you want to share by way of thanks before I say a little bit about the follow-up and then do our little closing thing?
I'd just love to say what a gift it is to be in a space where we can speak stories aloud and be heard. And it's the interplay of the listener, the reader, the writer that make it, this is just an artifact. It's nothing without the emotion and the connection that comes when we share. And so I'm just so grateful for everyone who's here in this space and for those who've brought this together to make this happen. I don't think we have enough spaces for oral storytelling in our society and culture today, and to slow down, to let in what we hear. So thank you.
Yeah.
All of you.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. It's been really fun. I loved hearing all three of you read too, because I've read Tracy's book, but I haven't read the other one. So it was really fun for me. And I have a garlic story I'll share with you sometime. And I loved hearing what your grandmother said about it's just a play. I needed to hear that tonight. So thank you. And thank you all for listening and being here. We had quite a few people sign up for this, like over 30. So those of you who showed up, yay.
Yeah.
It's a Saturday night, so
Yeah,
Thank you.
exactly what I was going to say. Thank you all for being here on us and giving your time to be here to support us and to learn and connect. And it's just a magical evening. So I'm very grateful for all of you, and especially for Tracy for this being her brainchild and putting it together for us.
Yay.
Yeah.
Well, this is wonderful. It's a beautiful, satisfying fulfillment of that desire to come together. Yeah. So in closure, I'm just going to take a minute or two. You could have a pencil and a pen or a piece of paper, or you can just reflect, because I'm going to invite you to write a story, but just using 6 words. A 6-word story that expresses what is rising up for you in this moment as we close our evening. And if there's 7, nobody's counting. but a 6-word story, and drop it into the chat. Something about what you heard or what moved you, or something about who you are as we depart this evening. And drop it in the chat. And don't overthink it. There's no test. There's no failure. Mm. Mm-hmm. And I'll include these little things in the follow-up email. And Nancy dropped in something up above in the chat feed where you can access our books. If you're feeling like a burning need before you go to sleep tonight, it's all right there. Cut and paste, click away. And yeah. And yeah, that's it. I think, although I'm feeling called, and if this is unplanned, I'm going off the plan, ladies. I just want to close our final closing with this fragment that is not written by me, but it's in my book. It's in Scottish Gaelic and in English, and it's a beautiful way to close, I think, and wrap everything up. If you'll allow me, I'll read it in Gaelic, Scottish Gaelic, and then in English. It's from a volume of material called the Carmina Gadelica, which is a series of stories, incantations, prayers, blessings that was gathered and published in the late 1800s. Marava, Maraha, Maravias, Gubra, Athrin Nangra, Ritrag Shriliana, Athrin Nangra, Ritrag Shriliana. As it was, as it is, as it shall be evermore, O triune of grace, with the ebb, with the flow, O triune of grace, with the ebb, with the flow. That's it. Well, enjoy your evenings. Cheerio. If you're off to bigger and better things, I think Heather has something she's doing, another reading or something exciting. Best of luck with that, Heather. And maybe Christine, Nancy, and Heather, we can debrief an email or something over the next day. And watch your emails for that follow-up email. And again, thank you, thank you. Feel free to unmute yourself and we can all say goodbye, cheerio, farewell at the same time or together. It's kind of corny, but I kind of like corny.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Mwah.